It started with a faint buzzing sound, persistent like a mosquito that wouldn't quit. I wiped the sweat from my forehead and glanced up from my tomato plant. There it was, black, shiny, hovering over my patch of land, its tiny camera lens angled downward like a snooping neighbor peeking over a fence. Instinctively, I grabbed my shotgun, but then another buzz came, followed by another. Within seconds, 4 more drones showed up, circling like vultures. At first, I figured it was just some bored kids messing around. Maybe they lost control of their expensive toy. But then I noticed the stickers on them. HOA property. My stomach dropped. There was only one person insane enough to pull something like this. Karen. Karen wasn't just your typical HOA president. No, she was a tyrant in yoga pants. A walking neighborhood surveillance system with way too much time on her hands and not enough sense to know when to stop. She had a permanent scowl, a voice that could strip paint off walls, and a ridiculous belief that the whole world had to follow her rules. Unfortunately for her, I didn't fall under her control. My farm was just outside the HOA's reach. But that never stopped Karen from trying. A week ago, she dropped a note in my mailbox, written in her signature passive-aggressive script. Dear resident, the state of your property is concerning. HOA regulations must be upheld for community beautification. Please ensure your farm meets the proper aesthetic standards. I crumpled it up and tossed it. She had no legal authority over me, and I figured she'd get bored and move on. I had clearly underestimated her level of crazy. Now here she was, watching me from above like some second-rate big brother. I planted my hands on my hips and glared at the drones. You. One of the drones tilted slightly, almost as if it was acknowledging my disbelief. I grabbed a rock and threw it at the thing. It dodged without breaking a sweat. The others hovered nearby, like threatening little hummingbirds, cameras zooming in on me. My anger started to boil. This was more than just annoying. It was an invasion of my privacy. Determined to get some answers, I stormed over to the HOA office, a shiny little building that seemed like it was designed just to house ridiculous rules and underpaid, overstuffed committee members. I didn't even get halfway to the door when Karen stepped out onto the porch, arms crossed, that infuriatingly smug look on her face. Jake, she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. I was hoping you'd stop by. Have you seen our new HOA security drones? They're pretty impressive, aren't they? Security? I scoffed. Karen, those things are spying on my farm. I don't even live in your HOA. She waved a hand, perfectly manicured, as if dismissing my entire existence. Your property borders our community, and as HOA president, it's my duty to make sure everyone follows aesthetic guidelines. We wouldn't want property values to drop, now would we? Lady, I grow crops. Unless you've got something against tomatoes, I don't see how this concerns you. Karen sighed, dramatically, like I was the one being unreasonable. It's not just the crops, Jake. It's the vibe of your farm. The equipment, the fencing, oh dear, those old tires by the barn? Simply unacceptable. I stared at her, trying to figure out if she was serious or just downright insane. So let me get this straight. You think some tires on my land are an eyesore, so you're sending drones to harass me? It's not harassment, she said, her voice pure innocence. It's compliance monitoring. I gritted my teeth. Turn them off. She smiled sweetly. I'm afraid I can't do that. HOA policy. I took a deep breath, holding back the urge to yell. Let me explain something to you, Karen. You don't own my land. You don't control what I do. And if those drones keep coming around, they're going to start falling out of the sky real fast. Her eyes narrowed. Are you threatening HOA property? I grinned. Nope. Just warning you. She huffed, spun on her heel, and marched back inside, slamming the door behind her. I stood there, fists clenched, figuring out what to do next. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. By the time I got home, the drones were still hovering around. If anything, they were closer now, almost hovering right over my crops. I grabbed my phone, did a quick search, and smirked. It was time to fight back. The next morning, I dropped by to visit my neighbor, Earl, a retired Air Force engineer with a workshop full of gadgets that probably shouldn't even be legal. When I told him about the drones, he let out a deep laugh. She's using consumer-grade surveillance toys, he said. Nothing fancy. You could take him out with a rock if you're lucky. Tried that, I admitted. Didn't work. Earl scratched his chin, then grinned. Ever hear of a signal jammer? An hour later, I was back at my farm, setting up a small black box Earl had lent me. According to him, it would scramble the drone signals within a certain range, making them lose control. I flipped it on and waited. The first drone wobbled, then sputtered, spiraling down to the ground with a sad little thud. I laughed. The second drone dropped right after, then the third and fourth. It was like watching flies get swatted out of the sky. By the time the fifth one crashed, I was wiping tears from my eyes. The next morning, Karen was back. This time, she didn't waste time with pleasantries. She stormed onto my land, face red, furious, phone in her hand like it was some kind of weapon. "You," she screamed. "You destroyed HOA property." I smirked. "You mean the illegal surveillance drones?" "Yeah, they had a little malfunction." Her jaw clenched. "Do you have any idea how much those cost?" "Nope. Don't care." She took a deep breath, visibly trying to control her anger. "This isn't over. You will be hearing from the HOA's legal team." "Good luck with that," I said. "Last I checked, spying on private property is illegal. But hey, maybe your lawyers will enjoy explaining why you were filming my land without permission." Karen opened her mouth, then closed it again. For the first time, she looked uncertain. I could almost see the wheels turning in her head as she tried to figure out her next move. I smiled, knowing exactly what was coming. Karen wasn't the type to back down. No, this was just the beginning. And if she wanted a war, I was more than ready to fight. Earl handed me a cold beer as we sat on his porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon over the field. The first batch of drones had been easy enough to take down, but we both knew Karen wasn't going to stop there. She was too stubborn, too obsessed with having control to just drop it. Sure enough, as I took a swig, my phone buzzed with a notification from my outdoor cameras. More drones. Bigger ones. I groaned. She upgraded. Earl chuckled and shook his head. Figured she would. Probably ran crying to the HOA board about her poor, damaged property. "I bet she convinced them to double the budget," I said, staring at the screen. The new drones were flying higher now, out of easy reach. They moved smoother, more deliberately. These weren't your cheap, off-the-shelf models. Karen had really gone all out. "She's going to keep pushing," I muttered. "I need to shut this down before she gets the idea to start flying those things inside my damn house." Earl took a long sip of his beer before grinning. "Then it's time to step up our game." The next morning, I set up a few more jammers around the property. Earl had given me a more powerful model, one that covered a larger radius. I placed one by the barn, another near the chicken coop, and one right in the middle of the field. If Karen wanted to keep playing, she was about to learn a hard lesson. The first drone showed up just after noon. It hovered carefully, like it was testing the waters. Then another one joined it. Within minutes, 3 more appeared, circling like mechanical hawks. I turned on the jammers, crossed my arms, and waited. The results came quickly. One drone wobbled badly, spun out of control, and crashed straight into my cornfield. The second jerked to the left, its camera swinging wildly before it slammed into a fence post. The third dropped so fast it looked like someone had swatted it with an invisible hand. By the time the fourth and fifth drones hit the ground, I was grinning like a fool. Then I heard shouting. I turned to see Karen storming up my driveway, her face as red as a ripe tomato. She was waving her phone like it was some kind of weapon, her voice screeching with rage. "You absolute menace," she yelled. "You think you can just destroy HOA property without consequences?" I leaned against the fence, looking unbothered. "Your property was trespassing." Again, she stomped her foot. "Those drones are legally authorized surveillance equipment." I raised an eyebrow. "Authorized by who? You? Because last I checked, you don't have jurisdiction over my land." Karen took a deep breath, clearly trying to regain her composure. "This is about community standards, Jake. Your farm is an eyesore. It brings down property values." I laughed. "An eyesore? Lady, this is a farm. Farms have dirt. Farms have equipment. Farms don't follow your suburban princess handbook." She glared at me, her nostrils flaring. "This isn't over." She turned on her heel and marched back to her car, slamming the door so hard the whole vehicle shook. As she sped off, I knew this wasn't just about property values anymore. This was getting personal. Earl was waiting for me back at the house, shaking his head. "She's not done," he said simply. "Yeah," I replied, cracking my knuckles. "Neither am I." The next evening, I noticed something off. The jammers were still running, but no new drones had shown up. It was too quiet, too easy. Then, just as I was about to head inside, I saw it. A single drone, bigger than all the others, was hovering at the edge of my property. It wasn't moving, just floating there, like it was waiting for something. I frowned and took a step closer. That's when I saw the logo on the side. It wasn't an HOA drone. This one was professional grade. My stomach dropped. Karen had upped the stakes. I ran inside and called Earl. He picked up on the first ring. I see it, he said before I even had a chance to speak. What the hell is it? I asked. Earl sighed. That's a private security drone. High-end. She must have hired someone. I muttered, my jaw tightening. Can the jammer take it down? Earl paused. Maybe, but if she paid for top-tier surveillance, it could have countermeasures. These things are built to resist interference. I kept my eyes on the drone, my mind spinning. Karen had really lost it now. She wasn't just spying on my farm. She was bringing in professionals. Well, I said after a moment, guess it's time for Plan B. Earl chuckled. You got a Plan B? I smirked. Yeah, and it's gonna be fun. The next day, we got to work. Earl had an old friend who owed him a favor, someone who knew how to redirect signals instead of just jamming them. We set up a makeshift signal hijacker designed to take control of the drone instead of just knocking it out of the sky. By the time Karen's new toy showed up again that evening, we were ready. I flipped the switch. The drone wobbled, twitched, then suddenly turned. It hovered for a moment before taking off, heading straight for Karen's house. Earl yelled, "Hell yeah? Look at that sucker go." I watched through the binoculars as the drone, now fully under our control, circled Karen's pristine backyard. It dipped low and knocked over one of her decorative lawn gnomes. Then, it turned toward her patio, knocking a cup off her outdoor table. Karen came charging out, her face twisted in shock. She started waving her arms, trying to shoo it away like it was an angry goose. But we weren't done. With a quick adjustment, Earl sent the drone straight into her swimming pool. The splash was perfect. Karen froze, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Then, as if realizing what had just happened, she let out an ear-piercing scream. Earl and I were laughing so hard we could barely breathe. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Karen wasn't the type to back down from something like this. If she was willing to drop that much cash on drones, I knew she'd come back with something worse. Still, I wasn't worried, because I had a feeling when she did, I'd be more than ready for her. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of sirens. I groaned, already knowing who was behind it before I even looked out the window. Sure enough, 2 police cruisers were parked in my driveway, and there was Karen, standing next to them with her arms crossed, wearing a smug, victorious grin. She looked like she'd just hit the jackpot. I stepped outside, wiping my hands on my jeans as one of the officers, Deputy Wilkins, walked toward me. He'd dealt with Karen's nonsense before, so the tired look in his eyes wasn't surprising. "Morning, Jake," he said, sighing. "Karen here says you've been destroying her property and engaging in cyber warfare against the HOA." I blinked. Cyber warfare? Karen jumped in before Wilkins could speak. Yes, he used some kind of illegal device to hijack my security drone and crash it into my pool. That's destruction of private property, and I demand he be arrested immediately. Wilkins pinched the bridge of his nose. "Karen, we've been over this. You were using drones to spy on private property. That's illegal." Karen gasped, as if I'd slapped her across the face. It was for the good of the community. His farm is an eyesore, and I was collecting evidence of his violations. I snorted. "Violations of what?" "Your personal taste in decor." Karen's eyes narrowed. "This isn't over, Jake. I'll take legal action." Wilkins looked at me, then at Karen, and sighed again. "Karen, unless you've got actual proof of a crime, there's nothing we can do." Karen's smug expression faltered. But nothing," Wilkins repeated, slower this time. "We can't do anything. Stop wasting police resources." Karen let out an indignant huff, stomped off, and got into her car, peeling out of my driveway so fast she almost took out my mailbox. Wilkins shook his head. "You know she ain't gonna let this go, right?" "Oh, I know," I said, watching the dust settle. "She's just getting started." That night, I noticed something new. Another drone, but this one was different. It was bigger than the others, and it wasn't alone. 2 more flanked it, moving in perfect sync. These weren't Karen's usual toys. She had upgraded again. I groaned. "Oh, come on." Earl was already at my place, sipping beer on the porch. When he saw the drones, he let out a low whistle. "Damn, She went all in this time. I pulled out my phone and zoomed in. Looks military grade. Earl chuckled. I got something for that. I raised an eyebrow. You always have something for everything. He grinned. That's what makes life fun. We went into his workshop and he pulled out a case, flipping it open to reveal a device that looked like a futuristic rifle. This, he said proudly, is a high-powered electromagnetic pulse emitter. One squeeze of the trigger and anything electronic within range goes down. I grinned. I like it. Earl handed it to me. Just be careful. It's got a wide radius, so don't go aiming it at your tractor unless you want to reset the whole damn thing. I walked back outside, took aim at the lead drone, and fired. The result was instant. The drone sputtered, twitched, then dropped like a rock. The other two followed, spiraling down in a messy cloud of sparks and broken parts. One of them landed in the creek with a splash, while the other crashed straight into Karen's precious white picket fence. Earl let out a loud laugh. Oh, she's going to be livid. I didn't have to wait long to see. The next morning, Karen showed up again. This time, she wasn't alone. She had a whole crew from the HOA with her, including a couple of guys in suits who looked way too official for something as ridiculous as a drone fight. She marched up to me, finger pointing accusingly. You've crossed the line this time, Jake. I folded my arms. Oh, and how's that? She dramatically pointed to the broken drone on her fence. These were top-of-the-line surveillance drones, and you illegally interfered with them. I have legal representation now, and I'm filing a lawsuit. One of the suited men stepped forward. Adjusting his tie, Mr. Jacobson, my name is Richard Calloway. I represent the HOA's legal interests. We have reason to believe you've been engaging in unlawful activity, including destruction of property and interference with community security measures. I stared at him. Security measures? Those things were spying on me. Calloway didn't flinch. The HOA reserves the right to monitor properties to ensure compliance. I smirked. You mean properties within the HOA's jurisdiction, which, in case you forgot, I'm not part of. Calloway hesitated. Karen's face twisted in frustration. It doesn't matter. I will not let you make a mockery of this community. I stepped forward, lowering my voice just enough so everyone could hear me. Karen, do you know what's illegal? She folded her arms. What? I pointed at the remains of her drone. Unauthorized surveillance. Privacy violations. Stalking. Trespassing. All of which you've been doing for weeks. Karen's mouth opened, then shut. Calloway shifted uncomfortably. I grinned. And you know what's funny? I've got all the footage. Your drones recorded everything, including where they crashed and how they were on my land without permission. Earl, who had been quietly filming the whole thing, held up his phone. I got it all right here. Karen's face drained of color. I cut her off. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to take your fancy lawyer and your little HOA crew, and you're going to walk away. Because if you don't, I'll be the one filing a lawsuit. And trust me, Karen, I will win. Silence fell. Karen's hands trembled as she clenched her fists. The HOA board members whispered among themselves. Calloway cleared his throat. I believe it would be in everyone's best interest to avoid further legal disputes. Karen whipped around to face him, her eyes burning with fury. You work for me. You're supposed to be on my side. Calloway adjusted his tie. I represent the HOA. And frankly, Mrs. Atkinson, this is not a case we can afford to lose. Karen looked like she was about to explode. Then, without saying another word, she spun around and stormed off, her entourage awkwardly trailing behind her. Earl let out a low whistle. Well, that was fun. I chuckled. Yeah, but I doubt she's done for good. Turns out I was wrong. A month later, the HOA voted Karen out as president after they found out she'd been funneling thousands of dollars into her drone surveillance project. She had no choice but to sell her house and leave the neighborhood. And the best part? I bought her old house at auction. Earl helped me turn it into a farm supply store. We hung up a sign that read Karen's Exile Feed and Supply. Every time I walk past it, I can't help but smile. Because no matter how much power she thought she had, in the end, she lost. And me? I got the last laugh.